Everybody, welcome back to a live version of Breaking the Grade. We've had a couple weeks where we've been running some of our previous shows. There's been some stuff going on in my live show of my life that has kept us from going live. But we're coming back to the stage with a bang. And this is going to look and feel a little different because we've got the Seinfeld feel of Breaking the Grade. Hopefully you guys recognize that if you can see it. And we've even got song that everybody should know who's joining in our audience here. I'll let that run a little bit. And then in front of me is Ken Spiegel, who is an EdTech legend. And I'm excited to have Ken in here because A, he definitely knows Seinfeld, and B, all about doing the opposite because we've started to talk about what that means. So Ken, welcome to Breaking the Grade Live. Tell everybody quickly, give us, 30 seconds, a minute on who you are, and then we're going to get into the show.
Thank you, Josh. Great to be here. For me, it's such a privilege, and to work with you has been so rewarding. This opportunity, I can tell you about myself, the past 25 years. I solve problems with technology. The past 20 years, those problems have been in education. And I have a team of top flight scientists and engineers from around the world who support me in my mission to try to help out education. We can do a better job in education, and technology can play a part.
Cool. Thank you. That's helpful. When we think about the work that you do, a lot about what you just said is certainly the solving of the problem. It could be literacy, and you have the platforms and the solutions to solve the problems. And that's great. And that's really necessary. And that is not my lane. My lane is working with great people like you, product people, educators, and really thinking through how we are going to get the right messaging and reach people so that they understand how you can transform their lives. And when you and I met and we started talking, you had been doing a lot of work with a lot of great people to try and post and to try and message and to try and email. A lot of those things I call slow burn methods. You'd been trying these slow burn methods and they were burning you out. And then we started doing the opposite, kind of like George Costanza. So before we get into you doing the opposite, let's first talk about our friend George. So this is my favorite episode of Seinfeld. It's called The Opposite. And in that episode, George is about to hit rock bottom. But in most episodes, he's about to hit rock bottom. His career, his relationships, his confidence, his, living with his parents, whatever it is, everything's a disaster. And then George in the diner says, I'm just going to do the opposite. Because Jerry says to him, well, if every instinct you've had is wrong, if you do the opposite, then everything will be right. And George, like he usually does when Jerry says something, he says, all right, man. So he was going to order tuna on white, and he says, I'm going to order chicken salad on rye. There's a beautiful woman sitting at the diner. He says, I'm not going to talk to her. I am going to talk to her. And one of the things I love about this episode that I forgot until I rewatched it is this is the episode that gets him the job with the New York Yankees. The dream job that he wanted. And so as I watched this episode, I began to think about how a lot of our clients in the Ed Sales Elevation Experience just kind of needed to do the opposite, you know, and you might then land your New York Yankees. And I'm kind of saying that to you because I know some things going on in the background in your life when it comes to the New York Yankees, when it comes to really, maybe achieving some big time goals. So now that I've laid out the show The Opposite, can you talk about how that relates to you, and how you are now approaching a lot of what you're doing when it comes to posting and messaging and really putting Ken the rock star out there?
Yeah, it's a great concept. George and Jerry were definitely onto something, and you can apply that to a lot of forks in the road in your
Mm-hmm.
life where you say, "I got to go the other way." And for us, we worked hard at trying to create content, trying to post uh, daily, uh, and that takes time, takes money, and we weren't seeing growth. We weren't getting the responses. That just wasn't working for us. And partnering with you helped us see that the type of posting we were doing, yes, it was frequent.
Mm-hmm.
The messaging wasn't going to get us anywhere. We were basically posting product advertisements there. And, in hindsight, 2020, I can see that, LinkedIn isn't the place for that. LinkedIn is about people.
Mm.
And as you've coached us, people want to buy from people that they trust, people that they know. And we had posted for a year and a half. And I would say that the greater audience didn't know anything about me at the end of that year and a half. I
Right.
kept my story to myself. And so we started doing the opposite. We pulled a
Mm-hmm.
George, and we stopped writing content that could be considered product advertisements, features and benefits of the product, and started talking about me, my team, the journey. Call it human interest stories that fill in the gaps of, if I were to buy from this company, who am I buying from? And that,
What do they know?
yeah, what are they about? What do they know? How did they get there? And we're industry veterans. We've got a lot of stories we can tell. There's
Yeah.
no shortage of, let me tell you about the time I was in an airplane to a customer and, we got turned around because of weather and, all sorts of, we've got stories. And so telling our story, talking about us, that was a big opposite turn of events
Mm.
for us.
Yeah. I want to point out, and I talk to you guys about this a lot in our coaching, is that you and John, the rest of your team, Igor, Samantha, super hard workers. I mean, you
Thank you.
guys were posting and posting and posting, and that um, is half the battle, right? I
Mhm.
sometimes I have to work with teams to build the system to get them comfortable to post anything. So you guys were really working hard, which probably, I say that out loud, probably made it almost more frustrating because the people aren't posting are just like, oh, well, I'm not posting. You guys are putting the effort in and nothing was necessarily happening. Um, you certainly weren't getting to talk to the New York Yankees. And when we begin to uncover the stories about you guys being industry veterans, to use your words there, people begin to understand that not only have you been there and done that when the messaging is kind of comes from the coaching standpoint, when you're helping them even before you meet them, then that begins to build trust. And we could go down a long rabbit hole when it comes to trust and George and so many other things that he did wrong as a character over, all of those seasons. But you guys have begun to do the opposite. And we're going to talk about, kind of what you're feeling and what you're seeing. But for now, I want to just kind of lay out a few things that I believe our audience can learn from doing the opposite. First of all, safe is actually kind of risky. When you polish that messaging, when it's so blah, that's the best word I can think of, then it actually hurts the trust. I had a client who I'm working with who created a really wonderful post, and he created kind of an AI picture. It looked like him, but it wasn't him. And I said to him, like, man, I think that picture is actually doing more harm than good. I'd rather see a picture of you 20 years ago. And I know that you've heard me say this. So can you talk about your belief and how you're maybe changing your feelings about why safe is actually risky and why it's cool to see the picture, even if it's just a picture of Kayak Ken? Talk about Kayak Ken.
Yeah, how we got to Kayak Ken was our tendency, our preference to be corporate and professional. We were always the small company needing to look like a big company. So everything from our branding to our assets to our postings, I always had this threshold that it needed to look corporate, kind of buttoned down. And that's what we did for years. I mean, we've been in business since 2012, and that's always been our imaging. But we changed it this year, with your coaching, and we put Kayak Ken out there. I have a hobby for years. I like to build kayaks from cedar strips that I mill myself, and I customize the kayaks. It's all for my personal use. I'm not looking to change industries, and getting out to to be on the water in a kayak that you've built from a bunch of boards is very satisfying, and I'm happy when I'm out there. And there's some great pictures of Ken in a kayak that he built, looking real happy out on the water. And so we started to riff off of that, positive state into the fluency of reading comprehension, flowing down the river, having a smooth stroke, going with the current. There's all sorts of wonderful literary technique you can apply from a river to just about anything. And Kayak Ken made his appearance last month on the LinkedIn platform, and not only did we get a lot of coverage, a lot of engagement, but people that I didn't even know were on LinkedIn who knew me from back in the day, just resurfacing, guys that I had worked with, 30 years ago. You see that, and it sparks interest. It sparks engagement, and I'm sure all of that will lead to, a much wider network effect for us, and that's what leads to business.
Right. It's this, we're going to talk about LinkedIn. It's what I like to think of as kind of the message lab mindset. And what's the worst thing that can happen, Kayak Ken, if you put a post out there on LinkedIn, and your kayak starts to sink on LinkedIn. Whatever, you'll do another post the next day, and you'll figure out what resonates. But you gave it a shot, and that's why LinkedIn can be a lab.
Mm-hmm.
Where you your own story. It's interesting. Your own story, people remember you. And
Yeah.
it is just your story and nobody else's. And then the effect for you is that it starts to give you confidence. It starts to give you clarity in what people care about. And it gives
Mm-hmm.
you a platform to communicate more, one that you can do on a daily basis. And you and I have talked about this, that LinkedIn is basically a conference that's happening 24/7. And you can either choose to join conversations or start conversations. And you joined a conversation as Kayak Ken, which is different than anybody else. So I do believe also, and I think this tide is turning still for you and your mind. And as you get ready, it took a little while for Kayak Ken to get in to the river of LinkedIn.
Certainly.
Why and how is that shifting for you?
We had this branding, this presence that was very corporate and buttoned down, and also our clients are, perhaps, um, in conservative industries, and so I wasn't looking to, put on psychedelic glasses and play a ukulele with a wig in
You
order
can
to
do
get
that.
attention. I remember Tiny Tim back in the day, you know? Um, and so, it was trying to strike a balance between, Tiny Tim attention getting
Yeah.
technique and, trying to maintain some professionalism. Uh, and so Kayak Ken was what we chose. It works for us. My association with the ocean, with the environment. I was in the Coast Guard. I was a merchant marine officer. So we have, I dig up photos from 20, 30 years ago, and can continue to share tidbits of my history, and all of that is relevant because all of that was very formative to
Mhm.
who I am today,
Yeah.
and what we bring to the table.
I have to admit a couple things. Um, it's been a couple weeks. You and I have gotten to know each other really well, along with John and your team. And you guys know I've been kind of sifting through some stuff here um, with the loss of my father, and so my brain is not as 100% as sharp as it always is, or I'd like it to be. As you were talking through Kayak Ken and kind of led us down into the literacy portion, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense as you go even further down and talk about your, experience with the Coast Guard, how you can help kind of captain the ship here about something you're very passionate about, which is literacy. And you know, we haven't gotten to this, and maybe we will tomorrow when we meet and have our session. But you're getting ever so closer to being able to give, I believe, some really passionate and interesting presentations, which would be
Hmm.
very different than the one that you and I originally talked about. I remember I was walking down the street in Mexico City and we were talking about your presentation in Spain, which I'm sure was wonderful. But if you
Hmm.
take that presentation, which was what, maybe 8 to 10 weeks ago, versus the story that you could tell now, it's just so different. Does it feel different to you? I mean, we haven't done the presentation yet, but do you feel like you could give so much more of a compelling um, presentation?
Absolutely. I feel much more comfortable with talking about me. I always, by design, would not talk about me, and I would talk about the product. I would talk about technology. But now I agree completely. There's a lot of value in sharing the who we are. Why are we doing this? Why are we like this? Where did our commitment come from? My desire to help language learners of the day there.
Hmm.
And I got into some situations, in my earlier years that, uh, made me say to myself, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to be languageless, if I can help it when I travel, or when I do work in other countries. And if that's what I need to do, how am I going to get there personally? So today, with our products that help English language learners, I have a lot more empathy because
Yeah.
of that. And the fact that I have that empathy is worth sharing. In other words, that's the best form of marketing, actually, to show that I've got a stake in this game, that I did some of this for me as well. And literacy, helping people, around the world that need to improve their literacy. I traveled a lot as a merchant marine officer and got exposed to a lot of, situations where you say, if these people had better literacy, they would have better lives.
Hmm.
And, not only outside the country, but inside the country. And it's that, um, skin in the game that I feel when I get up every morning and drive this company,
Hmm.
navigate the waters of, the international market for literacy and language products, and try to make a difference.
For those of you who are listening or watching, you'll see that our for 1 week and 1 week only, our logo has changed to look a little more like Seinfeld. We're having some fun with that, kind of doing the opposite. If anybody would like to kind of say hello in the chat, that's perfectly fine. Say who you are, where you are, your company. Most of us are in the education space. Um, as you just spoke, Ken, um, there are so many, and who knows how many companies out there doing literacy, um, but nobody's doing it like you, and nobody comes at it with that founder story and that angle. And one of the things that we worked hard on, and work on as a community, especially in the beginning, is our headline in LinkedIn. The headline, the formula being, I help who using what method get which results. And it's so cool because I sometimes have aha moments like I am right now. Um, that, what's up, John? John's in Georgia, but generally lives in Naples, Italy. Ken's very fond of that, I know. John's a great dude. Um, when we have radical clarity, when you are super clear, Ken, with who you can help, superintendents, how you can transform their lives, and what results you can get, it's almost like, all right, well, I get it. I need the help. Who the heck are you?
Hmm.
You're like, well, I'm Kayak Ken.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
can you kind of walk our audience through? I just did it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. It's something that we're talking about for the first time. Is we start that headline work week one, and you might be like, gosh, Josh, can we just move on? But that's why we work so hard on it, because we're so clear with our ideal clients, our perfect clients, that now it's time to talk about Kayak Ken. So can you react to what I just said, please?
Certainly, somebody smart once said, simple is really hard.
Hmm.
And it is. In other words, I had a profile that looked like your typical resume, right? And I literally went back to one of my old resumes, condensed it, and said, "Okay, this is what you put on LinkedIn." And that was, I don't know, 2012, and it sat there for 13 years until you came along
Hmm.
and said, "That's a resume." And I said, "You figured that out? Okay." Um, and so, what do I do for people is a different question. And cooking that down to the two sentences that are now my headline there took a few weeks actually, and it took a lot of coaching and being receptive to the coaching in order to get it there, because I was at the point where um, I knew I didn't have the answers. I mean, I knew that what I was doing was not getting me where I wanted to be. So uh, let we need to do something else. This
Let's
guy
do the
Josh has
opposite.
some exactly. Josh says, no, you need to do this. So I said, take me to your leader. I'm here. And, every day when I see that headline on my page, I say, man, that is just so crisp right there. And, we get uh, making connections on LinkedIn, they pour in every night, um, which is a great feeling. I love the little bell on my watch that goes off
Mhm.
when someone's connected with me, and that's really booming. And the difference is dramatic since we made it simpler, but it was
Yeah.
hard. Mhm.
Some some action. I just literally got it on my phone.
There you
But you can't
go.
see that person. Hopefully not, because I didn't get that approved. But I just got it on my phone right then and there. Beautiful. Or not on my phone, on my watch. So some actionable steps that we can provide here to folks in terms of doing the opposite, and basically kind of piggybacking on what you just said is the is I've thought about this as the opposite outreach email. The next time you go to write a cold outreach email or follow up email, write your normal safe version as old George, but then do the opposite and be new George and write a second version that is radically direct, that is very honest, and is stripped of all that marketing jargon that really doesn't
Hmm.
actually say anything. Get straight to the point, which is what we have done with all of our members of our community, and certainly with you. Straight to the point. Here's your headline. Here's how you can help. Here's who Kayak Ken is. And if you're looking for this help, you have now a captain of the ship that has been doing this for many years. Unfiltered post, another actionable step. Don't be unprofessional, but you can be different. You don't have to also polish something, probably not the best use of words here, but I wrote it, to death. Just share it. Just share it and use a picture of yourself from many years ago, even if it's a picture of a picture. It takes people
Hmm.
back to that time when you were a merchant marine or in the Coast Guard. So then there's also the ready, fire, aim video. And we've talked about this, and something I really think you should do more of, not from the studio you have right there, your office, but literally taking your phone, holding it, making sure the road in front of you is flat, and just walking. I don't know if my general liability insurance covers you falling. So that's why I want to put that disclaimer out there. I still am the son of a lawyer. Ready, aim, fire video. So let's talk about something that you haven't done. I don't think as much. What's your feeling on doing that? Do you think you're better prepared now to grab the phone, walk down the street, and just talk about Kayak Ken and how you can help superintendents? Are we getting there?
Absolutely. And I can tell you that, before we started working together, I would associate most of that type of those tactics as for kids. In other
Mm.
words, the TikTok generation, who's talking to their phones, and can't get off them. I just felt, you know, uh, it's not my generation, right?
Mhm.
And I would look out of place do being in there. Um, and since then I've moderated on that. I see the impact of those types of point and shoot videos. I see that they can be a vehicle for authenticity. In other words, with Samantha, she's I probably got 20 years on her, and she uh, migrated to that, and we call it Sam in the raw there.
Mhm.
And it's like you say, you just pick up the phone and shoot. I haven't done it yet. I'm looking forward to picking a topic, and I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
Don't drop your phone in the water, but it'd be fun to see you on the water doing something. That would be really unique.
I've
Um,
actually already priced out the tripod to hold the camera on the deck of the kayak.
there you go.
And, this way we can have a paddle, talking while paddling. Do you think that would work?
Um, I absolutely think it would be interesting from a technical standpoint. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, if you can secure the phone, and make
Oh,
sure that
yeah. Yeah.
everybody can hear you, that's absolutely a great idea. And I want to make sure that we also point out, and this is actually a conversation I had with John Greiner, who's on this right now, and I was explaining to John, who's in the middle of building, a really impressive platform for tutors and for learning, who happens to live between Georgia and Naples, Italy. Start showing that, man. Like, start showing that you do these, kind of live these two lives while building your business. And, he'll get there. And I think you'll get there as well. And I certainly respect that it takes time. And you, though, when you are ready, the most important part is that when you are ready to do that video, you've got a lot of clarity and in terms of the story that you can tell and what you should
Hmm.
communicate to your perfect client. The last point I wanted to make in terms of kind of actionable steps is I want to encourage people in terms of thinking about George Costanza and doing the opposite is to do the opposite in your next sales call. Do the opposite in your next sales call. Do not lead with your solution. Start by stating the hardest truth about the problem your perfect client is facing, not the solution. The fact that the problem is there, that you want to hear from them how it's affecting them. And that is basically the opposite of what most people would do
Hmm.
when they get on a discovery call or, God forbid, a demo call, which is just, let me show you how much I know. Let me just show you how I can solve your problems, teacher, superintendent, as opposed to, let me hear about what your challenges are. And that doesn't mean that your literacy platform has to change at all. What it means is you're going to hear what challenges they're having, and then you are going to be able to address those challenges because you have the answer. But you can't address their challenges until you hear them. This has begun to play out for you as well. Talk about the transformation that's occurring for you and for John and for Samantha when it comes to listening first when you get in touch with a perfect client.
Yeah, we call it listen twice, speak once. And it's, it's this fight against the natural tendency. You've only got, 15 or 20 minutes. You're going to lose them in the first 5 if you don't bridge the gap somehow. And you want to get those features and benefits and efficacy statistics out of your mouth into their ears there. And now we focus on having the first 10 minutes of that discovery call to validate the problem by hearing it from the customer. In other words, to make sure that, we may not be a fit. They, upon further discovery, we have to be open to this isn't a great fit. But to find out, is it, you have to ask the questions there. It's like an interview process to tease it out of the prospect to get them to clearly enunciate, their pain points, and then you can start, right? Then, and by letting them talk, you've probably hooked them because they're not used to being given that opportunity. They're, I've been in sales for 30 years, had all, some of the world's best sales training over the years. And a typical salesman is going to open with features and benefits and, hope that the client is still there when he's done. And the opposite is to open with this inquiry process, what are the top 3 questions you can ask them that will get them talking, right? And if they overtalk, then they're going to have a little guilt built up to let, in your favor there, which is good. I mean, if they only have 20 minutes and, 15 minutes is them talking, then you're very well teed up to get a follow-up meeting to say, I'd love, I think we might, tease it out. I think we might have something that could work for you, but I'm going to need 15 minutes. Can we reschedule? Can we have another meeting tomorrow? That type of thing. And that's a win. If you get to that in the first meeting, that's a win.
You know what? You really have been listening.
It doesn't seem so until I get a chance to, demonstrate it. But yes,
It's
I have.
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've been listening too. And one everybody who listens to the show knows that I listen to Alex Hormozy a lot, and something that he talked about. I don't know if it's a recent show or it could be many years old. BAM Fam, book a meeting from a meeting, and so you were describing what I believe to be really important. If it's a 20-minute meeting, and it should be 20 minutes, and do it less than 30, it catches people off guard a little bit. If they talk for 15, that's great. That's what you want. Even if it's one question and they talk for 15, and then they say, "Oh man, I've been talking the whole time. Tell me about you." And I agree with Ken where you say, you've said so much that has been so helpful to me. What I'd love to do is just book a follow-up meeting, and we'll talk more about how I can help, hopefully. But for now, this information has just been so helpful.
Yeah.
And one can only imagine, especially in a space like education where they're used to being sold to in minute 1, that you're going to delay talking about yourself and you're going to book a meeting from a meeting, okay, thank you. Let me get back to the 10,000 other things I have to do. And I really look forward to hearing about you. And you've built up
Yeah.
some curiosity. Go ahead.
Yeah. The fact that he spent 15 minutes talking to you and not the competition is also the win there.
Yeah.
In other words, you're 15 minutes down the runway there.
Hmm.
That's time he didn't spend with someone else. That's information that the competition doesn't have,
Hmm.
directly from the client's perspective. So,
That's cool.
s- yeah,
I never thought about it that way. It's almost like a power play, in hockey where, you're uh, you not only are a man up, the other team most likely is not getting shots on goal,
hmm
and I always think about that part of the power play, that not only you on offense, but they're just sitting back on defense. And except for an occasional shorty, for those of you who know, hockey is when you score on a power play, which don't happen so often, but they're super exciting. Um, it seems like you're spending time with them while your competition is not. And congratulations to the Florida Panthers on winning back to
amazing,
back. Yeah,
amazing.
I'm
Yeah,
really a big fan of Paul Maurice. I respect the Rat.
hmm
He's that Tom Wilson guy. You don't want him, you don't want to play him, but you'd love to have him on your team, and you can't stand him. So congratulations to the Panthers. And I know that you're from the great state of Florida. Um, so, Ken, thanks for taking the time, especially right now. I know you're preparing for some really big stuff in your business that
Thank you.
I would like to hope that the Ed Sales Elevation experience in our community played a small part. For you, it's also many years of hard work, that is kind of coming together, and so I'm really proud of you and happy for you. So
Thank you.
we'll tease
We're
that out.
excited. Thank you.
Yeah. So for everybody who joined us today, wherever you are, Georgia, Italy, anywhere, thank you for joining us. We will air this next week. And if you get a chance to watch The Opposite, it's a great episode. It's my favorite episode of Seinfeld, and I got a lot of favorite episodes. And Ken, um, you know, I am so grateful that you trusted me. And I know you had other opportunities to trust other people in the space. So I'm grateful that you trusted me and that you are believing in the opposite, because it is certainly working for you.
Thank you, Josh. It's really a great partnership that we have, on the personal and professional level.
Yeah.
And look forward to more.
Great. All right, everybody. Everybody, have a great week. And channel your inner George, whether it is what you're ordering or who you talk to, or in this case, you know, that that post on LinkedIn, or that discovery call with that superintendent or the headmaster at a school or the chancellor of a college. Channel your inner George and do the opposite. Have a great week.